Today, I'm with Murray Elbourn, CEO, Disability Sports Australia, DSA, the peak national body representing athletes with a physical disability. DSA aims to get more Australians with disability more active, more often, and Murray's been in the role for about 3 months. Now, Murray's had over 30 years experience in the disability sports sector as an athlete, coach, and sports administrator. He's previously held the position of Disability Inclusion Manager at Sports New South Wales, CEO of Blind Sports New South Wales, and Chair of Goalball Australia. In all these roles, Murray's led significant programs for people with a range of disabilities, increasing participation, revenue, and advocacy of the sector. Now, Murray's represented Australia in goalball and has co-captained the Australian men's goalball team at the 2002 World Championships in Rio, Brazil. Murray then moved on to coach the sport of goalball and coached the Australian men's team from 2011 to 2015 before going on to coach the under-19 youth girls who won the Goalball Youth World Championships, defeating Russia in 2017. That must have been fun, Murray. And
absolutely.
Murray's most recently, though, been sitting on the New South Wales Office of Sport COVID-19 Sports Recovery Group as a representative across the disability sports sector. Now, Murray's really well respected across the industry, and yeah, I love speaking to Murray on all topics, but mostly about supporting people with disabilities. So I'm really excited to chat with you today, Murray. So welcome. How are you?
Yeah, doing well, mate. Thanks very much for bringing me on. It's always good to talk to you and collaborate.
Yeah, cool. And where are you coming from today?
In my office in Sydney Olympic Park, with a myriad of storm and rain and sun. I feel like I'm in Melbourne.
Yeah, it's not great today, is it? All right, well, we'll kick straight in. What does well-being mean to you, Murray?
Look, I think it's a balance, isn't it? It's all about understanding what you need to do to have that balance in your life and to look after yourself, whether that's physically playing sport in community or doing something from a recreation standpoint, or mentally making sure that your family situation's good, relationships are good, you're surrounded by good friends who are supportive, and you have that opportunity to be able to vent when you need to and laugh when you want to. Things like that are really important for me in understanding well-being holistically.
Yeah. So you talk about those things around, having a laugh, spending your times with family, etc., spending time with good people. But what are some of the other things that you do to look after your well-being?
Look, I've obviously played sport my whole life. It's been a big part of what I've done. I started out playing mainstream sport. I played basketball, rugby union, and football for my school. And then I started playing adaptation sports. For those who don't know, I've got a vision impairment, and I've had a vision impairment since birth. I had scarring on both my corneas, and I have about 10% vision. And then when I was 12, I actually got cataracts on top of that. And because of the scarring on my corneas, I wasn't able to have cataract surgery to remove those until I was about nearly 30. And so for a long time, I went nearly completely blind in my 20s. And I only had 2% vision before my cataract surgery. So luckily enough, the cataract surgery worked fairly well, and I got about 10% vision back, which doesn't sound a lot, but it is quite a lot to be able to go through life with. And so then I started playing adaptation sports. So I started playing blind cricket, and I was lucky enough to be the vice captain of the New South Wales team and play for New South Wales on multiple occasions. But my real sport that I loved was goalball, sport that I really gravitated to and started playing when I was 18 for New South Wales, and was lucky enough to get selected for Australia the first year that I played, and then played for Australia until 2002, and then moved to the United States, where I played in the American tournaments, and then I started coaching as well. So I actually coached University of California and the Cal goalball team there, and was involved in the USA coaching program as well. And then when I moved back to Australia in 2010, I was able to be the assistant coach of the men's team. And then shortly after was the head coach to 2015, then started coaching the youth teams as well. So I feel lucky that I understand the sporting instance from a player perspective, a coaching perspective, an administrator. I was even a level 1 coach, referee official in the United States. So it's a bit of karma, I think, that I was a referee, seeing I pretty much gave it to the referees when I was playing.
Oh, it's always interesting when when you go on the other side, isn't it? You start to really appreciate, people's roles and duties and stuff. But I mean, that's incredible, Murray. You've had the whole gamut, haven't you? Whether it's been you playing the sport, administrating, official, so you can really, see the benefits of it, I'm sure. And, my next question was going to be, where does this passion for disability come from? But I think you've kind of talked a little bit about that, having such lived experience. But, do you want to elaborate on that any more?
Yeah. Look, I finished my goalball career and I was still playing nationally until 2014, lucky enough to finish with a national championship, and good way to go out. But then I had some injuries. Putting your body through that for 25 years, as you'd well know, David, is you wake up a little stiffer in the mornings in your 40s, and so I had a few injuries that I needed surgery on, and kind of didn't allow me to play any sports for a couple of years. And then I found blind and low vision tennis, and so from that well-being perspective, nearing my 50s now, it's great to be able to get out and play a whole new sport that I wasn't able to play before because the adaptions weren't in place. And so my well-being still revolves around sport and hitting a tennis ball around. I was lucky enough to be endorsed by Tennis Australia to go and compete in the World Championships. Unfortunately, those were in Italy last year. And that's where COVID really hit in Europe first off. And so those championships were cancelled and I wasn't able to play in that World Championships. But, to be a two-sport athlete for Australia is such a great feeling, and, that mental health side. And, it's really essential to keeping active and keeping your mind active, keeping your body active. So, I just can't talk enough about what sport's done for me. In building my confidence, giving me opportunities to travel the world, make friends, have a really, increased social network. So when people think about sport and well-being, they think about the actual action, but it's everything out of that action that makes sport an essential for my well-being.
Yeah. No, I love that. And like you said, there's so much more than just actually playing the sport and participating in it, isn't it? It's everything that comes with it. And just for people listening, could you just explain what goalball is?
Yeah, I like to talk about it in these terms. It's the reverse of dodgeball. So if you think about being on a court and someone throwing a ball as hard as they can at you, and then instead of getting out of the way of it, you actually dive in front of it. And even to make it even more crazy, you actually wear a complete blindfold so that you can't see the ball coming at you. It's an audible ball. It's got a few bells in it. And it travels at about 80 kilometers an hour. And it's thick, hard rubber like a basketball, weighs 1.25 kilos. And I can tell you, when you're playing in winter, especially when I played in America in winter, it feels like a boulder hitting you. So it doesn't have any give. So it's a pretty stupid sport when you think about it from those perspectives. But of course, I love it. And it's a unique sport played indoors on a volleyball court. And our women Paralympic team is priming at the moment, ready to go to Tokyo. So wishing them all the best of luck as well.
Oh, fantastic. So it sounds like you've had some bruises over the years, and from, the ball hitting you, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely some bruises, some broken bones, some fractures, all of the above.
And they say sport's supposed to be good for you. It's
yeah, that's right.
And obviously, well, I must say, is it 3 months now? Time goes quickly, but you've just got the exciting gig at sports, well, Disability Sports Australia, and changing lives through sport, which is, yeah, I'm sure a great honour for you, and to have that national kind of role. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about Disability Sports Australia?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel really privileged to have been given the opportunity to be the CEO of this organisation. It's got a rich history of looking after disability sport and promoting disability sport and adaptation sport in Australia and through the world. Its crown jewel is probably wheelchair rugby. That's what people know. And our wheelchair rugby, the Steelers team, they're primed also to go to Tokyo, so wishing them all the best. But the organisation as a whole really services the physical disability space primarily, and our members in our different states and territories also do a fantastic job in being able to promote participation and adaptation, working with national sporting organisations like us, and then our state sporting and territory sporting organisations. We have a direct staff member in the Northern Territory, which I'm really excited about. And we're going to be doing a lot of work in the Northern Territory, and we've got some great community partners up there. And we're working with the NT government, which is fantastic. And they've been extremely supportive. So there's just so much opportunity, David. As you know, I'm someone who kind of pushes the envelope a little bit and likes my outcomes. And so, the world's your oyster in an organisation like this. And one of the pleasing things for me is coming in at the right time. There's a conglomerate of organisations, NSODs, National Sporting Organisations for Disability, that have come together, called the Australian Sporting Alliance for people with a disability. And I've been a long time advocate of collaboration across the space. So being able to represent Disability Sports Australia in that environment is really rewarding. And a lot of people said that had never happened. But I always believe that, collaboration is the best outcome. And surrounding yourself with the right people who work in that and can change the space, that's what it's all about. So this year we're looking to change the space. We're looking to work extensively within healthcare, and we're mapping the healthcare sector nationally at the moment. We've identified about 25 national peak body organisations that we'd like to develop partnerships with, and like to bring health professionals in to talk about research and the environment, referral into more participation, obviously. And so they're kind of the aims. And then also, obviously, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. There's obviously a lot of people out there who are kind of lost in the system and don't know kind of where to go or how to get advice. And so we're really hoping to be very proactive with NDIS delivery agencies and local area coordination training and awareness, and play that role as a national partner, and then that cascade down to our state members and our territory members.
Mm. Well, I think it goes back to your point before around opportunity, and there's so much you could do, and you've rolled off some great projects there. Now I love the healthcare angle. It's really looking at the ecosystem that you're in, and it's going a bit beyond sport. And we've often chatted about the systems approach and bringing in different organizations and different perspectives and that collaboration piece. I mean, if we're coming to the end of the year, Murray, what would good look like for you in terms of that first year that you've had with DSA?
I definitely would love to develop some of those national healthcare partners into formal partnerships, and get some outcomes around more research through our Activate Inclusion Sports Days program and our Startup Kids program in schools. Those two programs that kind of underpin each other really talk about increasing that participation, but also gathering data, having a stronger data set, and then being able to conduct research from that data set, just to prove models and work across the sectors more, across healthcare, across education, across the NDIS and NDIA models. And I think, if we can do that and then be a support to mainstream national sporting organizations and state sporting organizations with our partners, that's a really important part as well, because we think that it's easy we should know how to do everything, but really there's a lot of organizations out there who want to do some great work, but don't know where to start, or don't have the resources, or don't have the kind of history in adaptation and inclusion. So it's definitely our opportunity to be able to hold their hand through the process, consult, build awareness, do training, and then again, coming back to our programs, enabling that continuous flow of information and data back to those organizations who want to put on events, competitions, programs, to be able to do that. And there's so many of them. We haven't even talked about community, where you have organizations like PCYC or YMCA or Belgravia who are doing really great things. And so it's important to understand that as well. And then obviously community organizations like Collective Leisure, from your perspective, who can come in and support with coaching and things like that. So it's building that, as you said, ecosystem, and putting things together so they start to make sense holistically, rather than everybody kind of doing their own thing. And I think for a long time, that's how it's been. Everyone's kind of tried to do the best with what they've had. But now there's a great opportunity to collaborate nationally.
Yeah. I love it. And yeah, what's coming up for me there is that capacity building, and you're trying to join the dots. There's a lot of good work happening out there, but it's not about duplicate. And you as the peak body, you can't do it all, but being that enabler, I think, and that connection point is the role, to get the best outcomes that you want to achieve. And, when we think about Australians having, I think 1 in 2's got a chronic disease, and, it doesn't seem to be getting any better, Murray. I think the stats are 1 in 2 people, with a selected chronic condition have a disability. So the research shows you that, if you are a person with a disability, 50% of those have a chronic disease, which is frightening statistics, really. What if we could nudge the system in one way to improve the well-being of Australians? What would that be for yourself?
It's a great question, and there's no easy answer, obviously, because it's a huge problem, as you mentioned. And I think the one thing that keeps coming back is that people don't know where to start. Health professionals don't know where to start to refer somebody through to the right organisation. NDIS don't know where to start to be able to put community sport and active recreation programs as funded goals in people's plans. How do you talk about that, especially when someone's just been diagnosed and the family's not having that as a focus? It's immediate things that they need to focus on. So it's really that collaboration and bringing people back together, I think, David, and making sure that people have a network around them of support that's going to be able to give them that information through that collaboration process. I think, again, we could try and do something in sport with sport, but if we're not talking to healthcare, we're not talking to education, we're not talking to local area coordinators, how is that going to be actually effective in attracting people to our programs and to be getting out there, overcoming that social isolation that a lot of people with disabilities feel, and overcoming, the challenges in actually getting to an event, having accessible events. That all starts with that intersector collaboration, in my opinion. Yeah. And without that, we're never going to be successful in raising participation in sport and getting people more active.
Yeah, and when you mention social isolation there for people with disability, I mean, COVID's been a great leveler, hasn't it? I think people have realised what it's been like for years with people who've got a disability, when they're not getting out there and they can't connect with people. And, so I'm optimistic that, the future's going to be better and working together. But I think certainly it's again that connecting the sectors across those boundaries, which is key. That's not an easy thing to do, though, is it? Because every sector or a lot of organisations have got their own mandate. I mean, have you got any tips for trying to, I suppose, pull these different groups or sectors together of like this common purpose?
Yeah, I definitely have had, am fortunate to have had some success, obviously working at Sport New South Wales and in my role there. I was given kind of freedom to be able to really, kind of do that big picture process. And I can talk about a trial that we did with Sydney Children's Hospital and Westmead Children's Hospital, who were great supporters. And I did a presentation to their therapy teams. And within a couple of months, we got nearly 90 referrals through from both those hospitals. And they got it. It was understanding just the right place to be able to put that, what happened once they were referred through, and what happens to track those people. And it's a circle, isn't it? Everything is kind of that circle of life. And so I think looking at that bigger picture is really important, because you can put Band-Aid fixes everywhere and spend all of your time putting out fires, putting on Band-Aids, but ultimately the same fires are going to start and the same need for Band-Aids are going to be there. Where I kind of take the approach, okay, well, let's fix top down and let's do the hard work of identifying who those 25 national healthcare organisations are, going in, setting up meetings, talking about collaboration, bringing sport along, having the participation programs that they can go into and support. And then that circle starts to form a little bit easier, and we start to have that outcome-based situation. And I really believe in that. I know everyone's really busy and everyone's doing good work, but I really believe in that big picture model to be able to get the outcomes that I think are really needed.
I think there has to be a vision, doesn't there, and a way, a path to get there. So, and you've got that, you've demonstrated that over the years, Murray, with the programs and the impact that you've had. I'm thinking about government as well and how they kind of link into this. And I know you've supported a lot of councils with disability inclusion plans, the DAPs, and they're obviously a really important document and strategy for local councils to deliver on a lot of the objectives we're kind of talking about. Have you got any examples there or ways that organisations can support councils with, I suppose, their services for or programs for people with disability?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate over the last kind of 4.5 years working for Sport New South Wales to work with a lot of fantastic councils. And councils do, an amazing job in supporting local community sport and active recreation programs. And I'll say that is when COVID hit and parks were shutting down and sport shut down for a 3 to 4 month period, councils were working extremely hard to try and reactivate their green space and their indoor spaces. And so going back to that, it's really important, I think, to find the right people. I did a presentation last week around disability inclusion action plans for councils. And a lot of the time what I hear is the person in council who's responsible for disability, or the DIAP as it's called, they're kind of just tasked with everything in council. So there's no real ownership by the silos in the council. And again, it comes back to that collaboration point. If you really want to change disability and inclusion in your council area, you need to work more broadly across that council to be able to have people buy in to what you're trying to achieve. And that's where, we did a lot of work at Sport New South Wales, and I'll continue to do a lot of work at Disability Sports Australia, supporting local government, state government through our state members and territory members, and then advocating at the federal government level. And I've already been lucky enough to have 2 meetings with Minister Colbeck, Minister of Sport federally, one about the vaccine rollout for COVID, and how Disability Sports Australia can play a role in supporting people with disabilities getting that vaccine. And then the other one was around, restructuring NDIA and how community sport especially, and active recreation or social recreation programs can be included in NDIS plans. And so again, working that top-down structure is really important. But I think government has a really key role to play, and has a lot of influences. So it's also about finding the influencers within the government structures and who can make that change and who can start to build those program scopes and do the things that we're talking about.
Yeah. And I suppose building those relationships with those influencers, then it's with that common purpose and, like a win-win kind of approach is really important. So that makes a lot of sense, Murray, in terms of the inclusion plans and, the importance of those. And I'm just thinking about you and your career, and you're a two-time Australian in different sports, and you've obviously had a lot of different roles. We've talked about Sports New South Wales, and now you're obviously at Disability Sports Australia. But where do you see yourself personally in the system that you're working in, and how do you want to contribute and influence it?
I think the best part of this job is having a seat at the table, is being able to talk to ministers or people of influence within industry, or having meetings with national peak bodies to be able to have those discussions at a high level. And that's what I see my role as, is facilitating change and facilitating awareness, not just within the sports and recreation sector, but as we talked about, in the education sector, in the healthcare sector, in government, in the NDIS space. So I feel very fortunate to be able to have that opportunity to be able to create change. And everybody who I've spoken to so far within the first 3 months has been really gracious in giving me their time and allowing me to schedule meetings. And I'll give you an example. I linked in with the CEO of Volunteering Australia. And for me, volunteering is a huge part of the national psyche. And, you can't do anything without volunteers and great volunteer support, especially in the sport and recreation space. And so we linked in, we messaged, we set up a meeting. And from there, we're building to a partner accord where we have a mutual understanding about two things: how we would work together to support people with disabilities wanting to volunteer, and then how we would build awareness for the volunteering communities around engagement with people with disabilities. So those two things coming from both angles is the best outcome that we could hope for in that volunteering space. And it's understanding that they were going to work with Sport Australia holistically around volunteering, and then Disability Sports Australia could come in and be that conduit or that expert in that inclusive, adaptive field of disability to be able to bring everything together. And so they're the kind of opportunities that I would look for in a partnership. And it was just, the best outcome possible, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think there's really an untapped market there. But like you said, sport is just built on volunteers, parents and, Saturdays and Sundays. And I think it's important to reward and recognize volunteers as well. They're obviously giving up their time, and but very, very important. So I'll move on to my last question, Murray. And there's obviously a lot of targeted groups or marginalized groups out there. We talk about the GBTLQI community, or multicultural and people with disability, etc. Where women and girls, for example, although that I think women and girls is definitely moving in the right direction in Australia, but where do you think disability sits, and what's your kind of what's your thoughts for the future, and in terms of or aspirations of where you want things to get to?
Yeah, look, I think what I would say to that is, I think disability is still the great unknown. And it's interesting to me, obviously working quite closely with the marginalised areas that you talked about, quite closely, women in sport, multiculturalism, Indigenous obviously as well. the advocacy around those, I think, is somewhat understood. There's still obviously lots of questions about the multicultural aspects of, the diversity within Australia and so forth. But the disability aspect, people still always tend to think about the worst case scenario when you talk about disability. So if I say to somebody, I've got a vision impairment, and I can give you some really interesting examples that I still face every day.
Would you mind sharing those?
Yeah, so there's two that stick out to me. One is I was working, so between when I came back from the United States and when I started working for Sport New South Wales, I was actually working in corporate Australia, in the energy sector. And I managed a national team. I was 16,000 clients and so forth. And I traveled around Australia pretty much each month with my team, meeting clients and doing business. And I asked the lady at Qantas one day if I could pre-board the flight. And she said, "Oh, why would you want to pre-board the flight?" And I said, "Oh, I'm vision impaired. It just helps me to get to my seat a bit quicker and get settled." And she's like, "Oh, it's so great that you're, working and you're able to work." And, and she meant it in the absolute nicest way. But, it comes across obviously as, well, that's how you think about disability, and the fact that you're surprised that somebody could have a job like that, and, travel around Australia and have clients and, work, in the mainstream. And then, just recently, I'm looking at houses, and I said to the lady, "Oh, I work at, Disability Sports Australia." And she's like, "Oh, that's so special. And those people must just love that you're looking after them." And, and it just talks about the disability, and how people see the disability rather than how people see people who are just like anybody else, that might have a challenge, whether it be physical, sensory, or intellectual, or medical. And I think we need to change the stereotype, and it's going to take a lot to change the stereotype. And so, when I say I'm vision impaired, and there's literally hundreds of different types of vision impairment, and how people can see. Same, obviously, with being hard of hearing and being deaf, or having cerebral palsy, or quadriplegia and paraplegia, amputee. There's so many different types of disability that it gets overwhelming for people. So everything gets lumped into a one basket situation, and that's how people see disability. So we need to do, I think, a better job of talking about the stereotype of disability and breaking down the stereotype of disability, so to educate people and make people more aware. And I don't know that we do that enough. I think we talk about, the NDIS, or we talk about, which is fantastic, by the way. And I have to say, I've had a lot to do with the National Disability Insurance Scheme and a lot of positive interactions with it. I know that's not the case for a lot of people, and that's what I want to fix, because I've seen the benefits of local area coordinators who do their job so well. I've seen the benefits of information linkages and capacity building grants that can just change the landscape of what is able to happen. And I think we need to do a better job of saying, hey, if someone doesn't get funded for something, why did that happen? What's the process? How can we fix it if it's fixable? And if it's not fixable, or there's more education that needs to happen, how does that happen? So, there's so much work still to do, David, and it's all great work. I love it. But it's a massive undertaking, and it's things like this that we can sit down and talk about it frankly, and people start to get a better understanding of it. They're the things that are really making change. So, congratulations to you and the work that you do in these sessions, to be able to educate and build awareness for people, because that's part of the system is doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for sharing those examples. And I always think people have got a positive intention, Murray.
They do.
People don't set out, most people anyway, not to, to upset people or, be bad in some way. But yeah, education's so important. I think the first step to change is awareness, and for people to, I suppose, understand, from from different perspective. So I think in that space and the role that you play, you're a big role model for a lot of people. And anytime I meet somebody new in this kind of space, they go, "Have you met Murray Elbourn?" So
that's flattering. It's good to hear. You know, I genuinely try to help as many people as I can, because I believe that's part of what this space is and how you should be with people. And so it's always refreshing to know that you're thought of in a positive light within your industry.
Yeah. And I always respond going, "Yes, I know him." I work with him sometimes, so it's all good. And I'm generally really excited for Disability Sports Australia, and to see the impact that you're going to have there. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you for your time today and everything that you do, advocating for people with disability and just inclusion in general. You know, I know the work that you did at Sports New South Wales, and yeah, it's been fantastic to talk to you, Murray. And is there anything else that you want to add just to close out?
You know, I just think, again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the Zoom call with you today. And I just encourage people to talk to each other and be open, because it's much better that you ask a question than walk away not knowing the answer to, and still having that question in your mind and that thought or that stereotype in your mind. So the more people talk about disability and the more people break down that stereotype, the better off everyone will be. So it's opportunities like this that, again, are so vital.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay, well, I'll let you go, and I hope to catch up with you soon, Murray.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, David. Appreciate your time.
See ya. Bye. Thanks a lot.